And when the sun rose and the mist cleared away, he saw that he was not far from shore. By hard swimming, for the sea still ran high, he managed to reach it and pulled himself out of the water more dead than alive. Then he flung himself down on the ground and fell fast asleep. When he awoke, he got up to explore the island and see if there were any men upon it. But though he found streams and fruit trees in abundance, there was no trace either of man or beast. Then, tired with his wanderings, he sat down and began to think. For perhaps the first time in his life his thoughts did not instantly turn to money. It was not on his lost treasures that his mind dwelt, but on his conduct to his parents, his laziness and disobedience as a boy, his forgetfulness of them as a man. If wild animals were to come and tear me to pieces, he said to himself bitterly, it would be only what I deserve. My gains are all at the bottom of the sea. Well, lightly won, lightly lost. But it is odd that I feel I should not care for that if only my pipes were left me. Then he rose and walked a little further till he saw a tree with great red apples shining amidst the leaves, and he pulled some down and ate them greedily. After that, he stretched himself out on the soft moss and went to sleep. In the morning, he ran to the nearest stream to wash himself, but to his horror, when he caught sight of his face, he saw his nose had grown the color of an apple, and reached nearly to his waist. He started back, thinking he was dreaming, and put up his hand, but alas, the dreadful thing was true. Oh, why does not some wild beast devour me? He cried to himself. Never, never can I go again amongst my fellow men. If only the sea had swallowed me up, how much happier it had been for me. And he hid his head in his hands and wept. His grief was so violent that it exhausted him, and growing hungry, he looked about for something to eat. Just above him was a bough of ripe brown nuts, and he picked them and ate a handful. To his surprise, as he was eating them, he felt his nose grow shorter and shorter, and after a while he ventured to feel it with his hand and even to look in the stream again. Yes, there was no mistake. It was as short as before, or perhaps a little shorter. In his joy at this discovery, Tiidu did a very bold thing. He took one of the apples out of his pocket and cautiously bit a piece out of it. In an instant, his nose was as long as his chin, and in a deadly fear lest it should stretch further, he hastily swallowed a nut and awaited the result with terror. Supposing that the shrinking of his nose had only been an accident before, supposing that that nut and no other was able to cause its shrinking. In that case, he had, by his own folly in not letting well enough alone, ruined his life completely. But no, he had guessed rightly, for in no more time than his nose had taken to grow long did it take to return to its proper size. This may make my fortune, he said joyfully to himself, and he gathered some of the apples, which he put into one pocket, and a good supply of nuts, which he put into the other. Next day, he wove a basket out of some rushes, so that if he ever left the island, he might be able to carry his treasures about. That night, he dreamed that his friend the old man appeared to him and said, "Because you did not mourn for your lost treasure, but only for your pipes, I will give you a new set to replace them." And behold, in the morning, when he got up, a set of pipes was lying in the basket. With what joy did he seize them and begin one of his favorite tunes! And as he played, hope sprang up in his heart, and he looked out to sea to try to detect the sign of a sail. Yes, there it was, making straight for the island, and Tiidu, holding his pipes in his hand, dashed down to the shore. The sailors knew the island to be uninhabited, and were much surprised to see a man standing on the beach, waving his arms in welcome to them. A boat was put off, and 2 sailors rowed to the shore to discover how he came there, and if he wished to be taken away. Tiidu told them the story of his shipwreck, and the captain promised that he should come on board and sail with him back to Kungla, and thankful indeed was Tiidu to accept the offer, and to show his gratitude by playing on the pipes whenever he was asked to do so. They had a quick voyage, and it was not long before Tiidu found himself again in the streets of the capital of Kungla, playing as he went along. The people had heard no music like his since he went away, and they crowded round him, and in their joy gave him whatever money they had in their pockets. His first care was to buy himself some new clothes, which he sadly needed, taking care, however, that they should be made after a foreign fashion. When they were ready, he set out one day with a small basket of his famous apples and went up to the palace. He did not have to wait long before one of the royal servants passed by and bought all the apples, begging as he did so that the merchant should return and bring some more. This Tiidu promised, and hastened away as if he had a mad bull behind him, so afraid was he that the man should begin to eat an apple at once. It is needless to say that for some days he took no more apples back to the palace, but kept well away on the other side of the town, wearing other clothes and disguised by a long black beard, so that even his own mother would not have known him. The morning after his visit to the castle, the whole city was in an uproar about the dreadful misfortune that had happened to the royal family, for not only the king, but his wife and children had eaten of the stranger's apples, and all, so said the rumor, were very ill. The most famous doctors and the greatest magicians were hastily summoned to the palace, but they shook their heads and came away again. Never had they met with such a disease in all the course of their experience. By and by a story went round the town, started no one knew how, that the malady was in some way connected with the nose, and men rubbed their own anxiously to be sure that nothing catching was in the air. Matters had been in this state for more than a week, when it reached the ears of the king that a man was living in an inn on the other side of town, who declared himself able to cure all manner of diseases. Instantly, the royal carriage was commanded to drive with all speed and bring back this magician, offering him riches untold if he could restore their noses to their former length. Tiidu had expected this summons, and had sat up all night, changing his appearance, and so well had he succeeded that not a trace remained either of the piper or of the apple seller. He stepped into the carriage, and was driven post-haste to the king, who was feverishly counting every moment, for both his nose and the queen's were by this time more than a yard long, and they did not know where they would stop. Now, Tiidu thought it would not look well to cure the royal family by giving them the raw nuts. He felt that it might arouse suspicion, so he had carefully pounded them into a powder, and divided the powder up into small doses, which were to be put on the tongue and swallowed at once. He gave one of these to the king and another to the queen, and told them that before taking them they were to get into bed in a dark room, and not to move for some hours, after which they might be sure that they would come out cured. The king's joy was so great at this news that he would gladly have given Tiidu half of his kingdom. But the piper was no longer so greedy of money as he once was, before he had been shipwrecked on the island. If he could get enough to buy a small estate and lived comfortably on it the rest of his life, that was all he now cared for.